Hello, welcome to the May 2021 Complexity Weekend cohort. I'm Daniel, and I am here with a facilitator, Kerry Turner. So hello, Kerry.
Hi, Daniel.
And I'm looking forward to this discussion to get to know a bit about your background and what you're bringing to Complexity Weekend. So let's just start off with who are you and how have you come to Complexity Weekend? What is your complexity journey?
Okay, thank you. My name is Kerry Turner. I'm currently sitting in the UK. I've had a long and varied journey around complexity, and I guess my journey started when I was back at university. So I did a first degree in maths, and I graduated from that in 1984. And as part of that degree, I did a unit in systems engineering with a guy called Peter Checkland, who was at Lancaster University, and he was head of the systems department there. And I guess that's where my journey started. I then went on to do a master's in operational research. And as a part of that, we built models, simulation models. And I learned a little bit about system dynamics at that point. My journey really with systems and complexity started in my career. So I left university in 85 and joined a new consultancy group. It was a group in an audit practice called Deloitte Haskins and Sells in London. And it was an amazing time because it was kind of the dawn of consultancy back in the mid 80s. And it was the dawn of the personal computer. And it was the dawn of the ability to really start to use analytical techniques in business as a result of that, in particular, building business models. And I got lucky because I got to learn about system dynamics from a person called Barry Richmond. And Barry Richmond was a PhD student of Jay Forrester at MIT. And he kind of realized that system dynamics as an approach would never take off without some really user-friendly tools. So he left MIT and created a new company called High Performance Systems. And he got some seed money from what was then a small Apple computers. And he built a package called Stella, which was the world's first user-friendly system dynamics package. And my boss spotted Barry and spotted Stella, and he brought the pair of them over to the UK to teach us how to do system dynamics. And it was an amazing time for me. I mean, Barry Richmond is no longer with us. He died quite young. He had a massive vision, and his big vision was to bring systems to the whole world. So his wording of that was system citizenship. And his way in was through user-friendly computer tools. And I mean, the first model I ever built in system dynamics was a model of climate change, or at least it was a model of what we thought of as the problem with climate change at that time, back in the 80s. And that was the holes appearing in the ozone layer as a result of CFCs rising into the atmosphere. So my first model was a really long-term model looking at that. And then in true consulting style, I finished the training on the Friday and started with my first client on the Monday as an expert. And I learned the definition of an expert, and that is somebody that can just manage to stay about 10 seconds ahead. And my first client with System Dynamics was Marks and Spencer, who are a big retailer in the UK. And they wanted a model of their whole business, a micro world of their business, so they could try out alternative strategies to find out what might work, and also to really start to understand where the real risks were in their business system. Because, of course, we could do with a system dynamics model what we wouldn't do in reality. We could try to bust their business model and understand where it was weak, so it could be reinforced in the real world. So I went on then to use system dynamics modeling approaches with a vast range of clients, always testing out their strategies and looking at risk. And then my journey changed. There seem to be sort of key points when your life takes a different way forward. And that was, I was working with another retailer, a retailer called Kingfisher. And the finance director I was working with there, he was kind of looking at the results that were coming out of the model and kind of looking at things that looked brilliant and throwing them in the bin and saying, I'm not buying that. I'm not going to do that. And then other things that looked barely viable according to the model, he'd look and he'd say, do you know what? I think I could make that work. And I said to him, hold on, you've paid us an awful lot of money to build this model. You seem to be ignoring it. And he said, well, I'm not ignoring it, but your models don't know these individuals like I do. Your models don't understand people. And it was kind of a massive thing for me, that big realization that all my numbers and my models didn't really understand the individuals in this thing called a business. I'd seen it as a system of sort of components and interactions, and not really as a system of people. And again, my life changed because my boss took us to the States. It was about the time that Peter Senge had published a book called The Fifth Discipline. And he said, Peter Senge's been talking about this. He's been talking about organizational learning. I think we ought to go to the States and meet him. And so we did. And I spent some time working with Innovation Associates. And this was kind of moving on from system dynamics being about building quantitative models and very much into getting people to work better together. So facilitating real life systems, the connections between people, as opposed to the connections between things. And I came back and it was like, once again, it was a bit like the experience I had with Barry Richmond. It was like I'd seen the light again and I was desperate to find a client to work with. And I got really lucky because we had some standing arrangements with big clients to go and do sort of evening lectures, evening presentations. I mean, they thought we were training them, but actually it was our marketing. Yeah, it was undercover marketing. And I got asked to go to a big company called Allied Dunbar, who are a big insurance company. And I was asked to talk about cost reduction. But instead, I talked about systems. And in particular, I talked about the systems between people and how that affected organizational performance. And at the end, as I was packing away my computer and things, one of the guys in the audience came up to me and he said, "You didn't talk about cost reduction, did you?" And I said, "No, sorry." And he said, "No," he said, "you talked about something much more important." He said, "I'm really interested. I've been given a task in this organization of redesigning all of our organizational management information." He said, "And you're quite right, this is all about the people." He said, "So I'd be up for doing a project with you, a research project to explore how we could use the sort of techniques that you're talking about right the way through our organization to revolutionize our performance management." And that was awesome because it was a great opportunity to develop something. I mean, Peter Senge sells organizational learning. I could never sell organizational learning, but I can sell strategy and I can sell performance management and performance improvement time after time after time. And that's what I went on to do. I started with Allied Dunbar and got involved in all of their performance management processes. And I worked with a huge number of organizations in the UK then doing this, both big corporates and most UK government departments as well. I worked in using this approach. And I guess the last big project that I did, my pièce de la résistance, was working internationally with Nestle. I worked for 3 years all over the world with Nestle, putting systems thinking and system dynamics approaches into all of their strategy and performance management processes. And I guess then my life changed. I've only ever had one employer. That was the place that I joined when I left university back in '85. But that place changed around me. It started off very small. There were only 100 people in the whole consultancy. My group was only 10 people. And over time, it grew. We merged with Coopers and Lybrand, and we became Coopers Deloitte. We merged with Price Waterhouse and became Price Waterhouse Coopers. And then we artificially sectioned off the consultancy and called it PwC Consulting. And in 2003, the partners sold PwC Consulting lock, stock and barrel to IBM Business Services. So I'd been in a partnership for 18 years. And suddenly I found myself in the biggest, bluest bureaucracy to walk the earth. Certainly at that point it was. And actually I struggled. What should I say? My values were severely compromised. And I decided to take a career break, a year off. Remember, I'd been there a long time. I loved my work. I loved my work so much. I didn't tell my boss this, but I would have done it for nothing. Okay, that's how much I loved my work. But suddenly I stopped loving my employer. And that was a massive issue for me. And I spent some time traveling on my year off. And one of the places I visited was France. And I made a massive discovery. I discovered that if I sold my property in the UK and moved to France, I wouldn't have to work for IBM. In fact, I wouldn't have to work for any other employer if I didn't want to. It was massive. It was a massive thing for me because I'd never realized that I had that potential, that choice. And when I say that, I don't mean that I was going to carry on living a consulting lifestyle. I mean that if I was really careful and lived like a pauper, I would be able to pick and choose who I would work with. And somehow or other, I managed to pull it off. I sold my property. I moved to a country where I couldn't even speak the language. And I suddenly opened up a massive space for myself. That was back in 2005. And suddenly I realized that I'd spent 20 years only really thinking about businesses and business problems. And suddenly I had a massive opening to think about lots of other things. And what I did was I started applying what I'd learned about systems to systems that really mattered to me. So one of the things that I did was I'm passionate about horses. Other than systems, I'm passionate about horses. And I took my horses to France when I moved there. And suddenly I started to think about riding as a system. So instead of thinking about it as something that you do to a horse, I started looking at horse riding as being about merging two completely different systems. Taking a horse, one system, and a human being, another system, and merging them in such a way that you would create unity. And out of unity, huge emergent properties. Okay. So I wrote a book about all my experiments. I started experimenting with my horses about how to achieve unity, how to really connect two completely different systems together. And when I say completely, I don't just mean bodily, I mean spiritually as well. Because riding can be an incredible spiritual experience when you decide to merge with a really powerful system like a horse in that sort of a way. So I wrote a book about it, and a book called Riding Dynamics, a little known book in the world of systems and complexity, but I do have a few copies left. And in fact, I have a new version on a Fed wiki, so I can let anybody have access to that. Because something that not many people know is that it's not really a book about riding. It's a book about connection. It's a book about connecting with systems. And if you change the word horse and substituted any other system, you could read it in that way and get an awful lot from it. So then I went on to look at water in the same way. Another thing I like doing is swimming. And I thought, what if, instead of swimming in the way that I'd been taught as a child, what if I considered swimming as a systemic activity? What if I thought about it as uniting with water? how would I swim differently? So I started doing experiments around that, and I started doing experiments with all sorts of things, and I started thinking very deeply about my home as a system, about my relationships with other people as a system and what was actually going on with them, and about the world, really, the bigger world as a system. And I thought a lot about all the problems that we face in the world and where might be the root cause of those problems. And I decided that the root cause of a lot of those problems lay in childhood. I became very curious about why we are also amazing learners between the ages of 0 and 5. You know, think about it. We teach ourselves so many things, and how that drops off, in particular, how our creativity drops off, and how when I was at school, I was taught to, well, I wasn't taught, I was rewarded for regurgitating stuff that other people had told me. And I thought, do you know what? This isn't great, because this isn't regurgitating things is not going to help us solve the big problems that we have in the world. I wish that I'd been taught systems when I was a child. In fact, I wish more than that. I think I knew systems when I was born. I think it was the way that I learned so astronomically fast. And I wish that the education system wasn't taking that away from children. And that leads me to where I am now, because back in 2018, I decided to try to do something about that. So I went back to school. I went back to university. I enrolled to do a PhD part-time at the University of Hull, the Centre for System Studies. And my big idea was that I was going to do an evaluation study. So I was going to recruit schools in the UK and try out different systemic approaches with different age groups of children, measure the effects over time. So it's going to be a long-term project, and in some way try to create some proof, some evidence that teaching children systemically might be able to completely change our world. Okay. That's what I was doing. I had loads and loads of experiments ongoing in lots of places in the UK, lots of different ages of children, both within the education system and in homeschooling. And that was all going on. I started traveling the world as well. I decided, why just the UK? I went to India. I taught groups of children in India. I traveled earlier in 2020 to Colombia and visited some schools in Colombia, and I started talking at conferences. I've been engaging the big systems organizations, so the System Dynamics Society. I joined the International Society for System Science. The thing to try and get these big organizations focused on children, because if we are to change the world, I think until we start doing something with children, we're never going to achieve what we're really looking to achieve. Okay. Then COVID struck and closed down most of my projects in the UK. Okay, so all the schools shut, and I went through quite a bad year last year. I lost a lot of energy and felt very concerned about what was happening in the world. But actually, I'm seeing it from a completely different perspective at the moment. Because actually, I think I was on the wrong track. I think the track of trying to change an existing system is destined to failure. The UK education system is an incredibly strong system. It has some huge reinforcing loops built into it that mean that it's incredibly difficult to change. So my big idea now is that actually we create a new system, that we reach children in other ways, and we pass on approaches which allow them to create the systems that we actually need, rather than trying to change any existing systems. And that brings me to how I met you, Daniel. Yeah, because I met you through the ISSS, through the International Society for System Science, and they've just started a students group. I mean, I never saw you before that. I show up to all the Saturday meetings, but you showed up to the students group. And you talked about Complexity Weekend. And that's why I'm talking to you right now, and why I'm looking forward to meeting everybody else in May at the Complexity Weekend and sharing more of my knowledge on system dynamics with you all.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing this. I wrote down so much, and there's so much I would want to ask you, but maybe just to close out this introductory video, what is making you excited to facilitate, and to the participants, what might be expected for your interactive sessions or your mentorship? What can they expect to be doing with you and learning by doing with you?
Okay, well, what I'm planning to do, I'm hoping that this is going to be the first of many chances to work with people on Complexity Weekend. So to begin with, we're going to be looking at an entry-level tool in the field of system dynamics, and that's a tool that we call a causal loop diagram. So I'm going to be helping you, first of all, to understand what a causal loop diagram is, and then to share with you some of the tools that are available online for creating these diagrams, and also to talk about how we can use them to design interventions and to either create new systems or to change existing ones using this approach. What I'm hoping is that you'll bring some of your own problems, things that you're curious about, along to this session so that we can explore them together.
Cool. This has been an awesome background. Let's close just by asking, what advice could we provide, maybe drawing on some of your experiences across all these diverse settings. What would be a piece of advice to give to a participant on how they could make the best of their experience, make it healthy, make it productive and connective?
Yeah, what I'd say is ask questions. Be curious and be courageous, and don't be afraid to share, because we all have legitimate perspectives on the system out there. And we become stronger when we're prepared to share those perspectives and connect with others to do that.
Thank you, Kerry. That's really powerful. This is a great video, and I'm really just looking forward to getting to know you better and to work with you in this cohort for May 2021 and beyond. So thank you,
Great.
Kerry. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.